My adopted daughter met her biological parents on her 20th birthday and decided to leave me. She said, "I regret ever meeting you." This came rather as a surprise because I lived all my life giving her the best I could afford. 3 days later, she ran back to me crying. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Stephanie Graham from Atlanta. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I remember the silence in that hospital room like it happened yesterday. The kind of silence that doesn't hum or buzz or settle. It just hovers, like it's waiting to see what kind of father I'd be. They handed her to me in a blanket so thin it made my heart ache, wrapped around her like she hadn't yet earned warmth. She was just a baby, 6 months old, a tuft of dark hair, a faint birthmark on her temple, and eyes that didn't know what they were seeing. I wasn't sure if I should smile or cry, but my arms locked around her and didn't let go. I whispered her name for the first time, Kayla, and something about it felt right in my bones. I didn't care that I wasn't her blood. I cared that she had no one until that moment, and from then on, she had me. I swore right then that I'd give her a life that never reminded her she came from abandonment. I was 32 at the time, working long hours as a mechanic with my own small garage on the edge of town. Not the kind of place people think of when they picture fathers raising daughters alone, but it was honest work. I had oil-stained hands, a cluttered kitchen, and a heart bigger than my wallet. My mother thought I was crazy. "You can't raise a child on carburetors and good intentions," she'd said. But I had already made up my mind. I'd built engines from rust and bolts, and I figured I could build a home out of love and second chances. I baby-proofed my one-bedroom apartment with zip ties and stubborn optimism. I learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. I went to PTA meetings in work boots and covered in grease. And Kayla, my girl, she never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. Raising her wasn't easy, not by any stretch. She had night terrors for the first year. I'd find her screaming in her crib, her tiny fists swinging at shadows, and I'd just hold her until she collapsed into sleep again. I never told her how scared I was, how sometimes I cried on the bathroom floor after she finally passed out. I couldn't afford daycare, so she spent her toddler years napping in the break room of my shop, learning to walk between toolboxes and hydraulic lifts. When she started kindergarten, I worked nights so I could drop her off and pick her up. I sewed her Halloween costumes by hand and packed her lunches with corny jokes written on napkins. Every birthday was a production, every scraped knee a crisis I treated like open-heart surgery. I wasn't just her dad, I was her whole village. I wore that role like armor. I think what hurts the most is that I never saw it coming. There was never a warning sign, no sudden shift that told me something in her was changing. We were close. Not just in that father-daughter way people talk about when they mean they tolerate each other. We were close. We had inside jokes. We made Sunday pancakes together, every week, no matter how tired I was. She'd sit on the counter swinging her legs, narrating whatever dream she had that week, and I'd flip pancakes with one hand while listening like her stories were gospel. She called me her ride or die. She used to say I was the only man she trusted. Even when she started college and moved into a dorm, she still called every other day. And then she didn't. It started on her 20th birthday. I had just finished setting up her favorite dinner, spaghetti, garlic bread, and a chocolate cake with extra frosting, just like when she was a kid. I even dug out the old photo albums, the ones she loved flipping through. But when she came in the door, she looked like someone I didn't recognize. Her smile was tight, almost rehearsed. She gave me a hug, but it was quick, like a formality. We sat down to eat, and instead of stories or laughter, she had a coldness about her. Then she dropped it like a bomb. I met them, my biological parents. I didn't even have time to respond before she added, "They want to be part of my life, and I want to know who I really am." The room went quiet again, the same kind of quiet from that hospital years ago, but this time, it didn't feel full of promise. It felt like something was ending. I told her I understood, even though my throat was burning. I'd always promised myself I wouldn't be the kind of father who held her hostage with guilt. So I nodded. I said. If it's what you need, then you should go see them. But deep inside, my heart cracked. I didn't say it then, but I felt something shift. Like the foundation we'd built was crumbling beneath us. Over the next few days, she stopped calling. When she texted, it was short, mechanical. And then, one night, just 3 days after her birthday, she came back to the house to pick up a few things. We barely spoke. She looked around like the place didn't mean anything to her. And as she walked out the door, she turned and said it. I regret ever meeting you. The words didn't hit me right away. I stood there, frozen, thinking maybe I misheard her. But she didn't flinch. She didn't even look sorry. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just stared as she walked down the steps and got into her car. The sound of the engine starting felt like a gut punch. I stood in the doorway long after she was gone, hoping maybe she'd turn back. She didn't. And in that moment, something in me shut off. All those years, all those scraped knees, bedtime stories, parent-teacher conferences, none of it seemed to matter. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and sat at the kitchen table with the cake still untouched. I couldn't even cry. I just felt hollow. And that's how it ended. Or so I thought. 1 minute, I was a father with a daughter I would have died for. The next, I was a man sitting in a dark kitchen with spaghetti gone cold and a heart that felt like it had been used up and discarded. It didn't matter how many bedtime stories I told, or how many sacrifices I made. To her, I was just the guy who filled in the space until the real ones came along. And now, I was alone. The days that followed her leaving felt like a war zone after the dust settled. Too quiet, too still, and completely foreign. I kept waiting for the rhythm of our life to return, for her to call and say she was just angry, that she didn't mean what she said. But there was nothing. No text. No knock on the door. No apology. Just that echo of her words replaying over and over in my mind. I regret ever meeting you. I found myself standing in the kitchen every evening out of habit, reaching for 2 plates, only to stop mid-motion, paralyzed by the weight of that absence. I thought I had built a life strong enough to survive anything. Turns out, all it took was 1 sentence to bring the whole thing down. By the end of that week, I did what I swore I'd never do. I started checking her social media. I didn't want to be the dad who snooped, who cyberstalked his daughter like some jealous ex. But curiosity doesn't care about pride, and I needed to know she was okay. What I saw didn't hurt in the way I expected. It gutted me. Pictures of her smiling with a woman who looked eerily like her, standing next to a man in a pressed shirt with a proud grin. Captions like, "Finally found my real family," and "So grateful for the truth." There was no mention of me, not even a whisper. It was like I had been edited out of her origin story, like I'd never existed. That's when the anger set in, not the kind that rages, but the kind that simmers so quietly it makes your bones ache. A week later, I ran into Jake at the gas station, my old friend from high school, and one of the few people who'd been around since Kayla was a baby. He saw me across the pumps and waved like he hadn't heard the gossip already. Small town news travels faster than fire. "Hey man," he said, walking over with that hesitant look people get when they don't know whether to offer sympathy or pretend nothing's wrong. "How's Kayla doing?" The question was innocent enough, but it felt like someone slapped me with a frozen hand. I hesitated, then shrugged. "She's doing whatever she wants, I guess." Jake nodded slowly, lips pressing into a line. "Heard she met her folks," he said, tone light but probing. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything left to say. We stood in silence for a moment before he added, "You know you did good, right? Raising her the way you did. Don't let her forget that." I nodded, thanked him, but in my head I was already spiraling. Because the truth was, she had forgotten. Or maybe she never really saw it to begin with. That night, I sat in her old room. It still smelled faintly like lavender and that vanilla lotion she used. Her posters were still on the wall, old bands, college brochures, a faded photo of the 2 of us at her high school graduation. I hadn't touched anything since she left. I don't know if I was trying to hold on, or if I just didn't have the energy to erase another part of myself. I sat on the edge of her bed, looked at all the things we'd built together, and I finally allowed myself to say it out loud. She left me. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they felt heavier than the room could hold. I didn't cry. I just sat there, waiting for the grief to loosen its grip. It didn't. A few days later, I got a call from her college's financial office. Apparently, her tuition hadn't been paid for the upcoming semester. I had always handled her school expenses directly, making payments months in advance. The voice on the line was polite, unaware of the chaos unraveling behind my calm responses. I told them to remove my name from her account, that I wouldn't be responsible for future payments. When I hung up, I felt something shift. Not anger, not relief, something closer to acceptance. She'd made a choice. Now I had to make mine. I called my bank and closed the shared account I'd opened for her when she turned 18. I canceled the card she never thanked me for. And when I was done, I sat on the porch with a cold beer and watched the sun disappear behind the trees like it had better places to be. It was around that time I stopped talking about her to anyone. Not because I didn't think about her. I did, constantly, but because the version of her I had built in my head didn't exist anymore. And maybe it never had. The girl who called me Dad, with a sparkle in her eye, who used to sit on my lap and beg me to read Goodnight Moon 3 times in a row, who once said I was her hero. That girl was a ghost now. In her place was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could look me in the eye and say she regretted meeting me. Someone who didn't hesitate to walk away. I couldn't hold on to both versions, so I let the ghost go. I had to. The final blow came 2 weeks later when I bumped into her biological father, Mark, I think his name was, at the grocery store. I recognized him from her photos, standing by the apples like he had any business walking around town like a proud parent. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, he nodded with a smirk that boiled my blood. "You must be Kayla's adoptive dad," he said, like I was some footnote. I didn't respond. I just stared at him, waiting for the decency he clearly didn't have. "She's doing really well. Just needed to be with her real family, you know?" That word, real, landed like a sucker punch. I wanted to scream at him, to list every moment I had sacrificed for her, every tear, every sleepless night. But I didn't. I just turned around and walked out of the store, leaving my cart behind. There was nothing left to say. That night, I made the decision. If she ever came back, if she ever realized what she'd done and tried to return, I wouldn't open that door again. I couldn't. Love isn't supposed to be unconditional when it comes to respect. And what she did, what she said, had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I was her father. I still am, I guess. But she stopped being my daughter the moment she chose strangers over me and didn't look back. I tucked that thought away, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Because sometimes, protecting your peace means closing the door on the person you once lived for. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was the sounds that lingered after. The echo of her laugh down the hallway, the creak of the floorboards outside her bedroom door, the phantom vibration of a phone that would never buzz with her name again. Every corner of the house was haunted, not with ghosts, but with memories that refused to sit still. I'd walk into the kitchen and instinctively reach for the second mug, then stop, hands suspended midair like my body hadn't caught up to my reality. Her bedroom door stayed shut, not because I was protecting it, but because I couldn't bear to face it. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was a shrine to everything I lost without warning, without a fight, without so much as a goodbye that sounded like she meant it. I started sleeping with the television on. Not to watch it. God knows I didn't care what was playing, but because the hum of voices made the place feel less dead. The silence wasn't comforting, it was accusing. It asked questions I didn't want to answer. Why didn't she see what you gave up? Why wasn't it enough? When did she stop loving you? And why were you too blind to notice? I replayed everything. Her high school graduation when she said, "I wouldn't be here without you." The college drop-off where she cried and clung to me like she didn't want to let go. All of it felt like a lie now, twisted by hindsight and soured by betrayal. I tried to hold on to the good memories, but they were contaminated, like drinking water after knowing the well's been poisoned. A week after the grocery store incident, my sister Laura came by unannounced. She had that familiar look on her face, the one she wore when she thought I was being stubborn but still wanted to love me through it. She walked in with 2 coffees and a bag of donuts like she wasn't about to pick at my scabs. "You're not eating," she said as she placed the food on the counter, not asking but stating. I didn't argue. She sat across from me, hands folded, eyes soft. "You haven't heard from her?" I shook my head. "Don't want to." That didn't sit right with her. She's a kid, Mike. Kids mess up. I looked up, met her gaze, and something in me snapped. She's 20. Not a kid. And she didn't mess up. She left. She spit in my face on the way out. Laura flinched, but she didn't back down. Still your daughter, she said quietly. I didn't respond. I just stood up and walked into the living room, needing space, but knowing there was nowhere left to run. That night after she left, I finally opened Kayla's bedroom door. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just staring. Everything was exactly where she'd left it. Clothes in the hamper, a textbook open on the desk, a half-used candle on the windowsill. I stepped inside and picked up the framed photo from her nightstand. Me holding her as a toddler, both of us covered in mud from a backyard mess she swore she didn't start. She looked so happy in that picture, arms wrapped around my neck like I was her whole world. I felt tears sting my eyes but refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry over someone who made me feel disposable. I set the photo back down, walked to the closet, and started pulling clothes off hangers. Not out of spite, but because I needed the room to stop pretending she still lived there. I donated most of her things the next day, kept a few keepsakes in a box, her first drawing of us, her baby blanket, the little ceramic turtle she made me in second grade that still had glue on the bottom. But the rest? Gone. I couldn't keep walking past relics of a daughter who no longer considered me her father. When I dropped the boxes off at the shelter, the woman thanked me with a warm smile, completely unaware of the storm swirling beneath my calm nod. I got back into my truck, sat in the parking lot, and gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there empty. That kind of emptiness doesn't announce itself. It just moves in and makes itself at home. It was during one of those empty evenings, beer in hand, TV buzzing in the background, that I got a voicemail from her college roommate, Tanya. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I'd always liked her. She sounded nervous, maybe even guilty. Hey, Mr. Ross, she began, voice shaky. I know this is probably none of my business, but I just thought you should know Kayla's been staying with her biological parents. And, well, from what I've seen and heard, it doesn't look great. They're not who she thought they were. She paused. She looks miserable, and she's been asking about you. Said she's thinking about coming back. Anyway, sorry if this was overstepping. Just thought you should know. The message ended, and I just stared at my phone like it had grown teeth. My thumb hovered over the call button for a second, but then I hit delete. She'd made her choice. She'd walked out and slammed the door behind her. It wasn't my job to reopen it every time she felt the sting of consequence. Love isn't just about showing up when someone's shining. It's about standing with them when they're not. I had done that for 2 decades, and when the time came, she chose the illusion of a connection over the man who actually stayed. If she came crawling back, I didn't want to be the safety net anymore. I wanted peace, not pieces. I wanted to stop bleeding for someone who didn't mind watching me hurt. I told myself, over and over, that I was doing the right thing. But the truth is, some nights I still stood by the window when I heard a car pull up, hoping it was her. That's the kind of love fatherhood builds. It doesn't disappear, it just hides behind the walls we build to survive. She came back on a Tuesday. It was early evening, the sky still painted with that dull orange haze that always made everything look more dramatic than it really was. I was sitting on the front porch, half-finished crossword in my lap, a lukewarm coffee in my hand, when I heard the crunch of tires over gravel. I didn't look up right away. I figured it was a neighbor, or maybe someone turning around in the driveway like people tend to do. But then the engine stopped. The door creaked open, and I heard footsteps, hesitant, uneven, like whoever it was hadn't decided if they were welcome. I looked up. There she was, Kayla, standing at the bottom of the steps with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and a look on her face like she didn't know whether to cry or run. I didn't say a word at first. I just stared at her, taking her in. She looked different, tired, thinner. Her birth mother started picking at her clothes, her choices, her college major, criticizing in the way that feels like love until you realize it's control. I didn't exist to them, she said, her voice shaking. I was a solution, a second chance, not a person. She looked at me, tears welling up. You were the only one who ever treated me like I mattered. And for a second, for the briefest, cruelest second, I wanted to wrap her up in my arms and tell her everything was okay. That she was home, that I understood, that we could start fresh. But I didn't. Because love isn't about offering someone a soft place to land after they've set fire to your house. It's about boundaries, respect, and sometimes it's about choosing your own sanity over someone else's redemption arc. I looked at her, steady and tired, and said what I needed to say. You didn't just leave, Kayla. You made sure I knew I was replaceable. You looked me in the eye and told me you regretted ever meeting me. Her tears broke free then, running hot and fast down her cheeks. I didn't mean it, she whispered. I was confused. I was angry. I held up a hand to stop her. I believe you. But it doesn't change what you said, or how easily you said it. She started to sob, face buried in her hands. For a long moment, I watched her cry. It hurt. God, it hurt. Every instinct in me was screaming to reach out, to hold her, to wipe her tears like I used to. But I didn't, because this pain wasn't mine to fix. She had to sit in it, feel it, understand the weight of the damage she'd done. Eventually, she looked up, voice hoarse. Can I come home? The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. I closed my eyes, felt the sting behind them, and opened them again. No, I said softly. You left, and I've had to start over. You made it clear I wasn't your father. Now I'm just living like that's the truth. She nodded slowly, lips trembling, and I could see how much it shattered her. But I didn't take it back. I couldn't. Not because I didn't love her, but because I did. And loving someone sometimes means letting them live with the consequences of what they've done. She sat there a few minutes longer, as if hoping I might change my mind. But I didn't. She stood up, wiped her face, and gave me one last look. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. I nodded. I know. Then she turned and walked back down the steps, bag in hand, shoulders slumped under the weight of her choices. I didn't watch her leave. I just looked up at the sky, let the silence fill the space she used to occupy, and wondered if this was what healing felt like. Slow, painful, but necessary. She reached out again 5 days later. Not through a knock at the door this time, but a text, simple, short, and cautious. Can we meet somewhere? I just want to talk. No expectations. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, rereading it as if the letters would shift and rearrange themselves into something easier to respond to. A part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted to say yes immediately. But the biggest part, the one that had been gutted, bruised, and rebuilt, wasn't driven by impulse anymore. I sat with it for a while, let the weight of it settle into my chest. Then, finally, I replied, tomorrow, 3 p.m., Lenny's Diner. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. It was an opportunity, for both of us, to finish what had been left in emotional limbo. Lenny's was the kind of place where time didn't move. Same vinyl booths, same flickering neon sign, same waitress with the tired smile and the notepad she never actually wrote on. I picked a booth by the window and ordered a coffee while I waited. I kept watching the door like I didn't want to be caught watching it. When she walked in, I recognized her instantly, even though she looked like someone still nursing invisible wounds. She spotted me right away and hesitated at the entrance for a beat too long, like she was weighing whether or not to turn around. Then she walked over, slid into the seat across from me, and offered a nervous smile. Thanks for meeting me, she said softly. I nodded. Didn't think this was a conversation we could have over text. The waitress came by, and Kayla ordered a tea she barely touched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I've been staying at a friend's, she began, her voice a little stronger than the last time I heard it. Tanya let me crash at her place until I figure things out. I nodded again, letting her speak at her own pace. They're not what I thought they'd be, she continued. My biological parents, I mean. I wanted so badly for it to mean something, to feel like I wasn't a mistake. And they made it feel that way at first. But then it got weird. Controlling. Like I owed them something. She paused, fiddled with her tea bag. I guess I needed it to be real so badly. I ignored the signs. I didn't interrupt. I just let her unravel it, piece by piece, the way people do when they're finally ready to look at the mess they made. After a pause, she looked up at me with a kind of vulnerability that almost broke through my guard. You were never a mistake, she said. I know it doesn't change what I said, but I need you to know it wasn't true. I never regretted you. I got caught up in something I didn't understand. I took a sip of my coffee and set the mug down slowly. You didn't just get caught up, Kayla. You burned the bridge behind you while laughing from the other side. She nodded, clearly expecting that. I know, and I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I don't even know if they should. But I wanted to face you. To apologize. Really apologize. Her voice cracked again, but she held her ground. You deserved better from me. That was the moment I realized how different this conversation was. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't begging. This was accountability. Real, painful, unfiltered accountability. But it didn't soften me. Not completely. It just made me feel like maybe we could both leave this table with something close to peace. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the cool surface of the booth. Kayla, I loved you like you were my own blood. I still do. That kind of love doesn't evaporate just because someone walks away. But love alone doesn't rebuild trust. And what you did, how you left, what you said, cut deeper than anything I've ever felt. I can forgive you, but I can't forget how it felt to realize I didn't matter to you when you needed me the most. Tears filled her eyes again, and for once, she didn't try to wipe them away. So what now? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I sat with that question for a long time. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it permanent. Now, I said, we move forward separately. Her face crumbled for a split second before she pulled herself back together. Not even as friends, she asked, hopeful but hesitant. I shook my head slowly. I don't want to reduce what we had to something casual. You weren't just a friend. You were my daughter. I gave you everything I had. I can't go backward and pretend that foundation still exists. It doesn't. Not for me. She nodded, slowly this time, like her body was finally aligning with the reality her heart had been resisting. Okay, she whispered. I get it. The silence after that felt sacred, not awkward, not tense. Just real. Like two people who had loved and hurt and lost, and somehow still chose honesty over comfort. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. This is for you. I wrote everything I didn't have the guts to say before. I took it without a word, slid it into my jacket pocket, and didn't promise to read it. We finished our drinks in silence. When the check came, I paid. Old habits die hard, even when the relationship that created them is already buried. Outside the diner, we stood by her car for a moment under the dim light of the flickering sign. Take care of yourself, I said, meaning it. She smiled sadly. You too, Dad. That word hit me like a dart, but this time it didn't draw blood. It just left a small bruise, the kind you carry quietly, without complaint. She got in her car, started the engine, and drove away. I stood there long after the taillights disappeared, hands in my pockets, wind pulling at my coat. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like defeat either. It felt like the kind of ending that doesn't need confetti or closure, just clarity. It's been 3 months since that final conversation at the diner, and not a single day has passed without me thinking about her. Not in a longing kind of way, not anymore. I don't wait for her texts. I don't check the driveway at night or glance at the porch expecting to see her duffel bag and guilt-stained face. But I do think about her, in quiet moments, in flashes of memory I don't invite. I'll be in the middle of fixing an engine, and suddenly I'll hear her laugh from the time we tried to build that birdhouse together, the one that ended up lopsided because she insisted it gave the birds character. Or I'll pass the ice cream shop where we used to go every Sunday after church, and I'll remember how she always got 2 scoops of mint chocolate chip and never finished the second. The memories come unannounced, and I let them. They don't hurt the way they used to. They just remind me of what once was, and what won't be again. I opened the letter she gave me 2 weeks after our meeting. I had tucked it in the back of my drawer, telling myself I wasn't ready, when the truth was I was scared. Scared it would beg for forgiveness I wasn't sure I had, or worse, offer excuses I couldn't tolerate. But one rainy afternoon, with nothing pressing on my to-do list and too much space in the house, I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the envelope with shaking hands. Her handwriting hadn't changed, still a little messy, still trailing off at the ends. The letter was 4 pages long. She talked about feeling lost, about always wondering where she came from, about that hollow part inside her she thought biology might fill. She apologized again, deeply, thoroughly, not just for the words she said, but for the way she made me feel invisible. She didn't ask for a second chance. She just said she hoped someday I'd find peace. And oddly enough, that's exactly what it gave me. Not closure, not clarity, but peace. Like the final note in a song that no longer needs to play. My days now are quiet in a different way, not haunted, just calm. I still run the garage, still take in too many projects at once, still drink my coffee too late in the day. I joined a local veteran support group, not because I'm a vet, but because they started one for men dealing with grief and estrangement. Funny how many of us there are, sitting in a church basement once a week pretending like we're there for the free donuts. I talk sometimes, not about Kayla directly, but about what it means to love someone who chooses to walk away. About learning how to stop chasing ghosts. A guy named Rich lost his son to addiction. Another, Dan, hasn't seen his daughter in 5 years. None of us are fixing each other, but there's something powerful about sitting in silence with people who know exactly what that silence costs. The thing about being a father is that the job doesn't end when the child stops calling you dad. The love doesn't evaporate just because it's been rejected. But what does change, what has to change, is where you put that love. I've started giving mine to other places. I help out at the local youth center on weekends, teaching kids how to change tires and check oil. Some of them don't have dads around. Others do, but you can tell by the way they look at me that they're starved for someone who shows up. It's not a replacement for what I lost, but it's something. It's me refusing to let the pain Kayla caused be the end of my story. I may not be her father anymore in the way I used to be, but I'm still a man capable of giving, guiding, and grounding. That's worth holding on to. I still keep a box in my closet labeled Kayla. I didn't get rid of it. Inside are the things I couldn't throw away: her baby blanket, her drawings, birthday cards she made me when she was little. I take it down maybe once a month, open it, sit with it for a while. Not to torture myself, but to remember, not everything was a lie. There were years when she loved me, and I loved her without question. That love was real, even if it didn't last. I don't need to erase those years to protect myself. I just needed to draw a line and stand on the side where I could breathe again. That's what boundaries are. They're not fences to keep people out. They're oxygen masks for when you've been drowning. Every now and then, someone asks me if I think she'll come back again. If she'll knock on my door in a year, maybe 5, maybe 10, with more apologies, with her own child, wanting to start over. And my answer is always the same. If she does, I'll listen. But I won't forget. Because forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into the space they proved they could destroy. It means freeing yourself from the weight of carrying their mistake. I've forgiven Kayla, not because she earned it, but because I couldn't carry the bitterness anymore. But that forgiveness lives inside my boundaries now. I don't owe her access to my life just because she regrets leaving it. Some doors stay closed not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Last week, I saw a young father walking his daughter through the farmer's market. She couldn't have been older than 4, and she was tugging at his hand, pointing at everything like the world was brand new. He was laughing, crouching down to her level, explaining what a zucchini was with the kind of patience that only love makes possible. I watched them for a moment, chest tight, throat thick. Not with jealousy, not even sadness, just reverence. Because I know what it feels like to be that man. I was that man. And for a long, beautiful stretch of time, I got to live that life. It ended badly, yes, but it existed, and nothing will take that away from me. So no, I don't regret being her father. I don't regret the bedtime stories, the birthday pancakes, the sleepless nights, or the scraped knees. I don't regret any of it, because those were the years I was fully alive, fully invested in someone who needed me, until she didn't. And when that need vanished, when the love turned cold and the words turned sharp, I didn't shrink. I didn't chase. I chose myself. That's the real ending to this story. Not the loss, not the goodbye, but the choice to keep living, keep loving, and keep standing in the truth of who I am. If this story hit you in the heart, or made you think twice about the weight of unconditional love, don't scroll away just yet. Sometimes walking away is the strongest form of love there is. If you've ever had to make the hard choice to protect your peace, I want to hear your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you felt this story, please like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life stories about love, loss, and learning to let go. Your support helps keep these voices alive. See you soon in the next story.